Brandon, welcome to the Tales of Leadership podcast, brother. How you doing, man?
Man, I feel phenomenal, especially after that intro. I like that. We had a countdown, we had
Yeah.
background music. That was high production level.
Dude, I gotta get in the right mindset. I always do that because it just re-centers me. Because we're getting ready to talk about something that I'm passionate about. I know
Mm,
something that you're probably passionate about too, leadership. And I always have to kind of recenter myself to, hey, forget about the stress of the day and let's
mm,
kind of be intentional now. So, yeah, I appreciate that, man.
100%. Yeah, it's funny. Somebody asked me not too long ago if I have a routine or a ritual that I do anytime before I speak or give a presentation, podcast, anything like that. And I told them the exact same thing. I got a song, and then there's a prayer, and then I'm ready to go.
I love that, dude. What, if you don't mind, what is the prayer?
Just to be used as a conduit. I think whenever I speak and I think too much about what I'm going to say, and I try and glorify myself and not sound like I'm stuttering over words, or if I
Yeah,
try and perfect it for the sake of me sounding good on stage, that's always when I make a mistake, always.
yeah.
And then the prayer is just, let me be used, let me be a conduit that your work and your will can be done through me. And it just puts me in the right mindset, and it honestly takes a lot of the pressure off of me because I don't have to have faith in myself or my own talents anymore. I have to have faith in him, and that he'll work through me, and it's not even on me anymore.
I love that, brother. Yeah, already starting the podcast off with a solid nugget, and
We're
I'm
coming in
ready to
swinging.
jump in. So, take the time up front to just provide to the listeners an overview. Who is Brandon Burns?
Yeah, yeah. The three-word answer I always give is athlete, speaker, coach. I've been an athlete ever since I was 10 years old. I was a gymnast. So I started the sport of gymnastics at 10, started competing at the ancient age, for anybody who knows about that sport, of 16, and then
Oh wow,
walked on, yeah, yeah, really late. Walked on to the University of Michigan men's gymnastics team 2 years after that. That's a whole big story that we can get into afterwards, but that led me down a really fun path of personal development. Ended up meeting a guy named Dr. Eric Thomas, one of the number one motivational speakers in the world, through my athletics journey. And fast forward a few years, I'm now his agent, manager, and I do a lot of keynote speaking myself, and then a lot of coaching specifically for entrepreneurs. So there's a lot packed in there, but that's the 60-second version.
and I love kind of like digging into the story of individuals, especially who have the ability to turn pain into purpose, and that's
Mm.
a theme that I'm seeing with, I call them purposeful accountable leaders or pals. One thing you'll learn about anyone in the military is we will turn things quickly into an acronym, and then we'll just communicate in acronyms, and then you'll look around like, what are these people talking about? It's funny that that is a superpower of mine. I will create acronyms out of anything. I've never had anyone on that has this kind of perspective when it comes to leadership. And I'm a little bit familiar with gymnastics because I think my wife was a level 9 gymnast, and she just mentally got done with it one day and just left
Mm.
because she was spending so much time to
Yeah.
try to perfect that to get to the next level. But how would you define leadership? And then how has that kind of changed and matured as you've grown?
I think leadership is the exemplification of your potential being actualized. And what
Mhm.
I mean by that is the more that you can develop yourself and the more that you can fully step into your own potential in every avenue, right? From a mental perspective, spiritual perspective, physical perspective, the more that you can fully actualize who you are and who you were made to be, I think that by example, other people look at you and say, you know what? What's making him tick? What is he, how is he thinking to be able to accomplish all of this? And that's the best way to lead. And I know a lot of people throw in, it's the ability to articulate and communicate and give people a vision. And I think that's all part of it. But I think that exemplification is the best form of articulation. You can talk all day long, but when you're showing people, now
Mm.
you're leading.
I always say this, and I probably overuse it, but it was one of the most important lessons that I've ever learned in my life. I've had a senior leader tell me kind of at a pivotal point. We're doing a live fire exercise. Hey, Josh, deeds, not words. And he just basically walked
Mhm.
away. And I love simple definitions of leadership, but I also love the perspective is that we have our own unique, malleable definition of it based on the experiences that we went through. To me, it's all about inspiration. It's to
Mm,
inspire people and provide purpose, direction, and motivation. That's my definition. And I love your definition because it's aligned with mine, but it has a slightly different perspective. And it's based on the flavor of life that you
mhm.
went through to get that. That's awesome. So let's kind of start digging into your leadership journey. How and why did you start gymnastics at the age of 16?
Man, you know what's so funny about that is I have no idea. And people ask me that question all the time, and I almost can't answer it.
Wow.
So I started gymnastics recreationally at the age of 10, and nobody in my family ever did it. I don't remember ever seeing it on TV. It was truly one of those calling moments where I literally ran up to my mom one day and said, I want to go do gymnastics. I want to do flips. Can you take me to the local gym and we can do a tryout? And I have no clue where that spark of inspiration came from, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about being a kid is you don't
Yeah.
question things like that. And as adults, we're always, well, does this make sense? Do the X's and O's line up? When you carry the one, does this all, and I think that we overthink things a lot. But as a kid, I just said, you know what? I've got this idea. I've got this spark of inspiration, right? And I just ran with it. So I did it recreationally for 10 years. I'm sorry, for
Mm,
6 years from the age of 10 to 16. And the gym that I had called home for so long, we didn't have a competitive men's program. As
mm,
I'm sure you know, men's gymnastics is a lot less popular than women's
yeah.
gymnastics. So not every gym has a competitive program for the men. So I really didn't have an option unless I was willing to move gyms. That was a challenge because there were expenses involved. We didn't grow up with a
Yeah.
whole lot. And there's a lot of expenses with competitive gymnastics. I like to say it's a bougie sport. Like you got to have some
Uh,
money to compete in gymnastics, right? So that was a barrier that we had to break through. And then there was a lot of fear. I was probably the
mm,
most anxious, insecure teenager you've ever met. And the thought of going out in front of, hundreds of people and even just doing the sport that I love, but doing it in front of judges and a big
yeah.
audience, especially being led by a coach that I wasn't as secure and comfortable with because I was going to have to move gyms, that just terrified me. And so between those three things, I was really paralyzed for a long time. And so that's what took me so long to start competing.
Two things you said there that I think is nuggets to kind of sit on and just let marinate for a second is one, you had to break through a barrier. I
Mm,
always have this kind of a concept of like a sledgehammer mindset. And there's the proverb, I think it's 27:17. It basically, iron sharpens irons, so one man will sharpen another. But
mm,
I kind of go to this concept of sometimes we have to go in it alone in life. And gymnastics, I think, is one of those sports of where it's you and the mat or the bar
yeah.
or whatever it is. And I know that from a different sport that I grew up passionate about is wrestling. Like
Mm,
you could do a duel, it doesn't matter. It's you and the other individual out there on the mat. And if you fail at the end of the day, you have no one to blame but yourself. And I kind of always go back to this sledgehammer mindset is what is the purpose of a sledgehammer? It can rust, it can chip, but at the end of the day, it is a blunt force for change. And it is
mm,
strike after strike will break through obstacles in life. So I love that breaking down barriers. And there's another thing that you said, and I think it's really powerful, and I want to dig into is overcoming fear.
mm.
You sit in those positions. How did you overcome that when you felt everyone was watching you? People either rise to the occasion or they shrink away. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, like mentally, how did you get through that?
It was 2 things. Number 1 was another fear.
Mm,
It's such a paradox, right? Another fear helped me get through the fear. It was the fear of unknown potential. So even
mm,
as a 15, 16-year-old kid, I was sitting there thinking, "Man, what if I gave this a shot? I know I got all this anxiety. I know I could fail. I know it could put me through a lot of pain, but what if I put everything I had into this and it worked? Where could
wow,
this take me?" And it just terrified me to feel like I could grow up and not know the answer to that question. So the
mm,
first thing was that fear. The second thing was the presence of an incredible leader in my life. I went to this gymnastics camp right around that same time when I was about 15 years old. And it was really the first time that I had encountered exposure to something greater than my environment and my immediate surroundings. I went to this gymnastics camp, and all of a sudden, instead of being the top dog in the gym, I'm like number 37 on the list of all these
Wow.
different athletes. It was the first time I'd been around that environment. And so it inspired me to say, oh, wow, all these other people, they're just like me, and they're trying to get these D1 scholarships. They're trying to go to these other schools and compete for these championships. And wow, maybe that means I can do it too. And I started training with these guys, and I realized, okay, they're not necessarily better per se, but they're further ahead. They're further
Mm,
along in this journey. So that means if I follow the same steps, the same blueprint, then maybe that means I could go the same destination. And I met this coach named Larry, and I was living in Huntsville, Alabama. That's where I was born and raised. And Larry owned a gym out in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he saw me training one day, and he came up to me and he was like, "Where do you compete?" And I said, I don't compete. Right. And I was a really shy kid too. So this was coming out like, I don't compete. Right. And he was like, "What do you mean you don't compete? You're really good." I said, "Well, my gym doesn't have a competitive program, and my family doesn't have a lot of money. So we can't really move gyms." And, on and on and on. Told him the story I just told you. And he said, "Well, why don't you ask your parents if they'll drive you out to my gym and just check it out? Just see what it's like. If you like it, you can compete with my guys and I won't charge you a thing. It'll be completely free."
mm.
And it was such a good offer. My mom literally confronted him and said, "What's in it for you? Like, why are you doing this? Is something wrong
Oh,
with
wow.
you? Are you like, what's going on here that you're trying to get my kid to come out here for free? Because this doesn't even make sense." Right. But he was just a genuine, good-hearted person who really wanted to reach out and help somebody who needed it. And I ended up going out there training for about 6 months. And I remember the specific moment where I was able to break through that barrier was I was training and I was having a really hard time getting a skill, right? Mental blocks are a big thing in gymnastics. And I was just doing it over and over and over again and falling over and over and over. And I don't even remember what he said to me, but I remember him pulling me aside and just having a 30-second conversation. And in my mind, it clicked that if I can learn to trust somebody like this, I'll be okay. Even if the
Mm.
whole thing goes wrong and I fail, we run out of money, we can't make it to a competition, I fall in front of everybody. If I've got somebody like this that's around me, it'll be okay in the end. And what's amazing about that story is it ended up just adding up the cost, the time, because Chattanooga was about 3.5 hours away from Huntsville. And I didn't even end up competing for him. But because of what he taught me about myself and what I could be capable of in the right environments, I then was able to move gyms, get a coaching job to pay for all the expenses back home in Huntsville. And so even though I never competed with him, he started a ripple effect that literally led to me competing, going to Michigan, meeting Eric Thomas. Nothing would have been the same without Coach Larry.
He's a purposeful, accountable leader. That's
100%.
someone that kind of like defined that has transformational leadership skills, but at the center of it, the servant leader does not have an agenda. And it's really hard nowadays when you encounter someone like that, our guard instantly always goes up. Like, what's in it for you, man? Because it's hard to believe that people will just generally want to see someone succeed. And it's funny you say you're from Huntsville, Alabama. I'm stationed right now in Huntsville, Alabama,
Really? You at
Redstone
Redstone?
Arsenal. Yeah, right now as of recording, I'm sitting in Madison, Alabama, talking to
No
Brandon.
way. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, that's such a small world, dude. There were so many nuggets that you just dropped on. One is finding an incredible mentor
Mhm.
early and upfront, really in your informative years that kind of laid you on the path that you're at right now. And then
Absolutely.
the other key ones was stretching yourself. That's something that I heard kind of a whisper in there is that you were the top dog at the gym that you were. You moved to this other gym, you were in the 30s. I guarantee you began to exponentially grow when you were put into that gym because then you saw what other people are capable of and it drove you, inspired you to seek more. And then you said another couple amazing things is that you have to trust in other people. And I learned that being in the military is that you have to trust the men and women to your left and the right, especially in like life-threatening situations. I have to trust that you're going to make the right decision, not just to protect you, but to protect me. And I think gymnastics, there's a correlation there because you have to trust your coach because you're doing life defying moves, stuff that I can't even do. I tried to do a handstand one time and I just failed. That's epic, man. That was a lot of really great nuggets right there.
No, I appreciate that. You know what's funny is when I was probably around that same age, maybe a little older, maybe like 17 or 18, I read this book called Gymnastic Psychology. And I ended up
Mm,
going to Michigan getting degrees in economics and psychology. And in that book, they did this study where they looked at these athletes and their relationships with their coaches. And what they found was that as the skill level of the athlete increased, the more important the relationship with the coach became. And the
mm.
less important the technical knowledge of the coach became. And it's this crazy upside down idea where you would think that the more difficult and death defying skills that you're doing, then you would want the coach to be more technically sound and have all of the X's and O's correct. But in reality, it's the relationship and the trust factor that becomes even more important than any of the technique.
I could I think I can resonate with that, because I'm thinking through, like, the lens of an Olympic athlete, and really, you're probably on that level. At the beginning stages of everything, it's all about technical skill, learning those moves, getting the fundamentals down. But once you have that, once you've learned it, what separates, I think, extraordinary people from just ordinary people is their ability to perform those things at a high level. And when you get to that level, you have to be able to have someone in your corner. And I've said this before, but I call it like an accountability tree, someone
Mhm.
who's firmly planted in the ground and will not allow you to give up on yourself. And I think the hardest thing to overcome a lot of times is just the mental game, especially with gymnastics. I've never done it, but I'm just assuming from my experiences and from a wrestling standpoint is that it would always get to me.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's a super, super mental sport. And I can't remember the book that I read this in. I'll have to go back later and maybe shoot you a text so I can cite it. But there was this book that I read that said once you get into that like 80th or 90th percentile of technical skill in any given discipline, it
Mm,
really does become the X factor. So I think the example that they used was for basketball players after 6'4" or 6'6", more height doesn't actually correlate with better stats,
I
right?
love
So
that.
if you're 6'6" or if you're 7'2", it's irrelevant. At that point,
Mm.
like you pass a certain threshold of skill, and now it's the mindset, it's the work ethic, it's all these other the relationship with the coach, it's all these other X factor things. So there is, of course, a certain threshold that you have to pass to get into like you're in the conversation in terms of technical skill. But once you're there, skill and talent isn't enough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on you at that point. Skill and talent is not enough. It's up to your individual ability to want it. I love that, man. So, all right, so transitioning, you join this new gym, you really begin to start taking gymnastics seriously, and you can see an avenue to go to. By the way, my favorite school, Michigan, go blue. What were some of the challenges that you had to confront transitioning from that high school age going into that college age? Because I see it, you hit a growth during this
Mhm.
new gym, and I'm assuming there was some exponential growth that was getting ready to take place joining a college.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's funny looking back on it because I thought that during those last 2 years of high school, 17 and 18 years old, I thought that that was all the challenges that I was gonna have. Like, I
Mm,
thought that was the tough part, right? Because I'm getting used to competing in front of people. I'm working the coaching job to pay for everything. It was challenging, it was. But when I went to college and I walked on at Michigan, that was a completely different level. So, first of all, I was homeschooled from
mm,
2nd grade all the way through high school graduation. So I went from a school of 1 to a school of about 60,000. So that was a
Wow.
culture shock, not to
Yeah.
mention moving across the country from Alabama to Michigan. My parents were not in the best health, left them
Mm.
on the other side of the country. Super introverted, super anxious kid still, even at this point. So that was for sure a culture shock. And then when I got to the team, I wasn't a shoe-in. I wasn't a scholarship guy. I was a walk-on.
Mm.
So fighting for that spot and really for the first time having the pressure of it's not just for fun anymore. Like this is real. Those two definitely come to mind.
Wow. Not just for fun anymore. It's real. No, that kind of brought me back to my first deployment to
Mm,
Afghanistan, doing all these training exercises, going out to the ranges, doing all these live fire events, but all of it's for nothing depending on how we perform when we actually have to go there. And I always
mhm,
bring this up, and it's probably one of the most overused metaphors in coaching, but Hernan Cortez burning the ships. But I always kind of go back to a more modern approach is an air assault. And I'll never forget the first time I did an air assault. Um, they dropped us off. If you've ever been on a rotary wing aircraft, the first thing that happens is a brownout, is just a huge pool of dust. You can't see for 30 seconds. You can just hear it and you're praying, hey, please don't run over me, helicopter, or anything like that, because you can't see anything. And then as soon as that bird takes off, you have this moment realization that, hey, this is it. If my team does not perform, that's death, right? It could lead to death. And
mhm.
having that moment, I think, in gymnastics was pretty impressive. So looking kind of at your background, you did not achieve success up front with gymnastics. It took you several times. And correct me if I'm wrong, right? Like four out of five attempts to
Mhm.
get onto the team. That is incredible, Brandon. It really is. Like the level of grit it takes to continue to go after something that you're obviously deeply passionate about. How did you do that?
Well, it's funny, a lot of times when I tell that story of getting cut from the team 4 times in 5 years, people assume that it was the last year that I made the team. In reality, it was the first year. So the first year I walk onto the team, and I was actually on the team for that first year. I
Mm,
was redshirted, so I only competed in a couple of exhibition meets, and then every subsequent year, I kept getting cut from the team. Circle back after that 5th year getting cut from the team, the head coach actually came to me and said, so what happened was we had a 20, I want to say 24 roster spots. It was the largest roster in the NCAA for men's gymnastics.
wow.
And I'd been fighting every single year through this 5-year process to make the team. And I had injuries. Of course, there were other recruits who came in who knocked me down on the roster, all sorts of things going on. And that last year, we actually had one guy get kicked off the team, and it was after the midseason cuts. So
Mm,
nobody else was going to get cut from the team. We were at 24. A guy gets kicked off for behavioral issues. Now we're at 23. Head coach came to me and said, I know you've been working at this for 5 years. Technically, there's a spot available on the team now. You can have it because you would be that 24th guy. You can have it. I would like for you to come on as a volunteer assistant coach instead, because I
wow.
think you are of more value to the team as a coach than you are as an athlete. And I think you can really move the needle and make an impact and make a difference as a coach. I would like you to join the coaching staff instead. So the championship rings, I've got 2 Big Ten championship rings. Those are as a coach, never as an athlete. So I had some
Mm,
success as an athlete in the sense that, I had some viral videos blow up, 50 million views, and it did a lot of things for me from a business perspective, a personal brand perspective, a passion perspective. But it never worked out the way I thought it was going to work out, but it worked out perfectly. Isn't that
sure.
funny?
That's how life is, I swear. Sometimes when we think that we've just absolutely failed, it's opened another door. It kind of comes to the theme that I'm seeing with this episode is it's all about perspective and mindset and how we view the world. And I have a strength statement, and I try to use this in my coaching that I do with people is they develop a strength statement for your life. So when you get into that moment, you can use this as a quick affirmation just to recenter yourself and get back. And for me, it's every day's a gift. I'm not going to waste
Yeah.
mine. And I've seen what a bad day is. I think getting at the end of the day, getting cut from a team, but having grit. And that's where I kind of go to that. And here's an acronym for you, right? Grit. So guts, resilient spirit, integrity, and tenacity. If
Love
you
that.
you had those things for, and now I even love you even more because you failed not up front, but at the end, and you continued to go. You did a reverse, don't hate me on this, Rudy, where Rudy failed every single year first, and then at the end he succeeded. It
Mhm.
takes a special kind of just grit to get after it and continue to go. And what I love about that story specifically is someone saw greatness in you and they offered you the position, hey, you can come on the team, but I see something inside of you that other men could benefit from. And
Mm.
to me, just hearing that story is, I think that was your spark. I think that
Yeah.
was kind of when you turned your pain into purpose.
100%. And I'll go back too, because I want to make sure that I answer that question that you asked instead of just storytelling the whole time. So you said, how did I, have that grit to do that for 5 years?
Yeah.
There was a couple of things just off the top of my head. Number one is passion. I
Mm,
have this formula where I don't believe that work ethic is a real thing. And people talk about work ethic all the time. What I think work ethic really is a combination of two sub variables that add up to work ethic, or what we always talk about as work ethic, and that's discipline and passion. Because if
mm,
you're passionate about something, you're going to put in the work whether you have to or not, and if you're disciplined, you're going to put in the work whether you feel like it or not. So if you have those two things, then that adds up to what we commonly think of as work ethic. And I would like to think that I had both, but for sure the passion was so strong that people would ask me, why do you keep coming back year over year? I'm going to be practicing anyway. I'm going to be training anyway. Why not try and see what I can make out of this? If I'm going to be in the gym so much because I love it, let's see. Why not? Let's see what I can do. So the passion was definitely there. The second thing was I truly believe that the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And what I
mm,
didn't want to do is go into a situation on year one where I said, I'm committed, I'm dedicated, I'm going to do everything that I can to help make this team successful. And then 2 or 3 years in, when the adversity and opposition strikes, I kind of go back on my word and say, you know what? I meant it 2 years ago, but now it just seems like the pain has overcome the force of like the character that I had when I made that statement. That doesn't work for me, because there's
mm,
going to come a time later in life where, whether it's a business deal or whatever it is, where that ability to, one, stand on my word, and two, to be able to work without needing a carrot to chase and outwork other people who are getting a reward when you're not getting a reward or a payoff for that effort, that comes in handy. Because if you have that skill set, it's really hard for anybody else to compete with you. So now working with ET, being a speaker, coach, is really, really tough to compete with me, because I would do, I've proven that I'm willing to work harder than anybody else for 5 years straight for basically free, with no reward, with absolutely no payoff that comes with it. So take that into a business perspective. That's tough to beat a guy like that.
yeah.
That's an uphill battle, right? So I knew that that was a skill set that I wanted to develop. Third, last but not least, I would say phenomenal leaders, phenomenal mentors. Throughout that time, throughout that 5 years, my dad, he's technically my stepdad, but he came into my life before I was ever even born. So he is my dad to me. And he was diagnosed with cancer twice over those
Mm,
5 years. And I watched this dude go through that, and he was genuinely more concerned about how me and my mom were doing emotionally than he was about how he was doing physically. Like he never missed a day of work unless he absolutely had to. He would literally go to work, and he does engineering, so he builds UAVs for a living in Madison, actually. So I'll say it offline, but you'll probably know where he works. And so he's these engines outside. He's, standing inches away from these props that are moving at 120 miles an hour, and, this really physical manual labor. And he would go to work with a colostomy bag attached to
wow.
his stomach. And I was like, man, you can't tell me that he can go through all of that and I am going to back down because I'm getting told that I'm not good enough. Like that,
Mm,
like he's holding on to his commitments to protect and provide his family that he has no obligation, by the way. Like, I'm not his blood son. He has no obligation to do that for us. And he's doing it every day despite what he's going through. And I can't show up to the gym and give 100% effort. That doesn't work for me. Right. Then same thing with my coach back at home. I called him one day, I think my junior year. I was genuinely thinking about quitting. The one time that I thought about it was when that video blew up, 50 million views across social
Mm,
media. And this was before the days of NIL. So I'm getting sponsorship offers left and right, getting a lot of money thrown at me. I can't accept any of it because if I do, it forfeits my eligibility, and then I'm done. I can't even try and try out for the team anymore. And keep in mind, my family's not in the best position back home either. So that money is really enticing. And I called my coach about it, and I was like, I don't know what I should do. And he said, don't forget that this is what you wanted. He said, when you were training with me 3, 4, 5 years ago, this is what you said that you wanted, was the opportunity to do your sport at the highest level. Because Michigan at that time, when I walked onto the team, was the back-to-back reigning national champion team. I could have gone to a lower level school and competed all 4 years. I wanted to go to the best. So he
mm.
said, this is what you wanted, was the opportunity, not the guarantee, to do what you do at the highest level and see what you're truly capable of. He said, it sounds to me like you're being pushed and stretched harder here than you would be anywhere else, or doing the social media stuff, or taking the money, or anything else that's on the table. So I think you should think about, did you really mean it when you said that this is what you wanted?
Mm.
And that was it. So good leaders, passion, and staying accountable to my word. Those are the 3 things.
I love that. I love that formula too. Discipline plus passion equals a work ethic. I think at the end of the day, one thing I'm really picking up from you, Brandon, is that you're probably one of the most resilient individuals that I've ever had on this podcast, and probably will ever get a chance to meet, because it really does take a
Thank you.
level of hard work to do that. And you remind me of the sheer tenacity to continue to pursue something over a long period of time. And I bet you didn't do the same thing every year. So the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, expecting a different outcome or result. I guarantee you, every year you continue to grow and grow. And it brings up a book by James Clear, and he talked about a metaphor of an ice cube, and I kind of call it the rule of 1%. Is that it's not about making a huge change at the beginning, and that's why most people fail at formulating habits, is because they jump all in. Is It's about small changes, 1% changes over a period of time. And if an ice cube is the metaphor that he used, sits on a table, 28 degrees, 29 degrees, 30, 31 doesn't move, 32, yeah, just starts to move, because it's at that freezing point. It's at the tipping point. It's in the battle. It's the decisive point, that moment of time of where you will gain a decisive advantage over your enemy. 33 degrees, it definitely starts moving. 34, now you have friction and traction, and you're moving forward, and you continued to go. And that is such a good nugget. And I want to make sure people understand that, is do not allow failure, especially up front, to prevent you from pursuing something you're passionate about. It took Thomas Thomas or Edison, I can't remember his first name right now, over 9,999 times to produce the light bulb. And when he was asked why he didn't quit, is because I found 9,999 ways to not build a light bulb. And at the end of the day, that dude has like over 1,000 different patents. And that was such a powerful point there. And I really wanted to make sure that I drove that home.
100%. Can I touch on that for a second?
Absolutely.
I remember when I was that same gymnastics camp that I was telling you I went to, that exposed me to all those athletes that were better than me for the first time. That camp actually did motivational speeches every single
Mm,
week. It was a core part of their week, and they would have these Olympians come in as special guests, and they would do some speeches. They actually used one of Eric Thomas's voiceovers for the intro when everybody was running out, and the
oh,
first
wow.
day of camp. So it's a lot of foreshadowing there with my life. But these Olympians would come in and do these motivational speeches, and Carly Patterson, she's an Olympic gold medalist. She's also a motivational speaker now. But she said this thing that stuck with me. She said, hard work never disappears.
Mm,
And I heard that for the first time when I was 15. And I truly did not know what it meant, because especially that, freshman, sophomore year, I'm 18, 19, still kind of maturing through this process. And I'm looking around like, yeah, it looks a lot like the hard work is disappearing to me. I don't have nothing to show for this, right? And then finally, probably my junior, senior year, it started to sink in when I realized that although that hard work never manifested externally into trophies, awards, a spot on the team, etc., that hard work didn't disappear because it changed who I was fundamentally.
Mhm.
And it gave me the opportunity to prove to myself, like I said earlier, that I can work for 5 years straight with no reward. It gave me the opportunity to prove to myself that I can stand on my word, my commitments, my dedication, even after that feeling that I said that I had when I said it has left me. Right. So that hard work definitely turned into something, but it turned into something internal instead of external. And I think that that's a concept that a lot of people don't value enough. And frankly, I was one of those people. It's so funny to me that I'm a speaker and I'm in the personal development industry now because I was the person who would hear something like that just 5 years ago and say, that's some nonsense. You're making yourself feel better about the fact that you failed and it doesn't mean anything. You should have just done better. Like I'm a very results oriented person. So for me to be
Yeah.
in this deep personal development space is really, really ironic. But I had to learn that the hard way. Like I
Yeah.
believe God had to force my hand and say, son, listen to me. This is how the world works. I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care if you don't believe it, but I'm going to give you this experience so that you will finally understand, so that you can help other people understand who are just as stubborn and hard headed as you one day.
Yeah. So the military is amazing at this. So we call them hot washes or after action reviews. If it goes horrible, it's a hot wash. If it goes okay, it's an after action review. And I'll never forget every single time you go into one of those things, you're like, yeah, your chest is all pumped up. Like I did an amazing job. And then they just start hitting one thing after another, after another, after another of all the ways that you screwed up and could have done it better. And then
Mhm.
you leave that so demoralized. Uh, yeah, it's funny because it's a tipping point. It's you either choose to continue to move forward or you allow that negativity. If you go into the Cartman triangle, to kind of set in and play the victim card, like, well, I gave it my best effort, then I'm
Mhm.
never going to grow. And but you have to change it. Hey, yep, you gave it your best effort. You did not succeed, but you have not failed. The moment you fail is the moment when you actually stop trying. You make that cognitive decision to stop trying. And to me, and I know to you, because I can just tell by who you are, I'm never going to stop. You're never going to stop until there's no more air in my lungs. I'm always going to be trying to pursue what I'm passionate about and what I believe my God-given purpose is on this earth. I would love to kind of transition now to what leadership lessons have you taken away from your past that you're transferring to life right now?
Mhm. I think one of the biggest things for me has been treating people like the unique individuals that they are.
Mm,
That was a big, big thing for me. When I first started coaching, I honestly thought that I was going to be able to walk in there on day one and just blaze it. Like I really thought I was that guy. I was like, I
yeah,
got this. I'm going to be super successful as a coach from because I always kind of knew deep down I was a better coach than I was an athlete. And I was a good athlete. I just wasn't good enough to be in the top 24 because and men's gymnastics is a funny sport. It's really similar to wrestling, actually. Title IX has really done some damage to it, and so a lot of these programs are getting cut because they're the first to go. Right when you got to
mm,
equal out sports, the ones that don't make any money at all and have a low following, those are the first ones to get cut. And so there's only at the time of this recording probably about 14 Division I men's gymnastics teams left in
wow,
the entire country. And so if you figure about 20 roster spots on each, you're in the top like 0.5% just to get a college spot, right? So it's super, super difficult. But even though I was a good athlete, I knew that I was always a better coach. I didn't really love the competing in front of people. I got better at it. I hardened myself a little bit and got used to
mm,
it, but I knew that I was a lot better and naturally gifted at breaking down systems and processes, seeing things in a cause and effect way, and being able to say, I can look at that, go back 7 steps, fix this. That's going to get you the outcome that you want. That's why I do so much coaching and speaking now, is because I can translate that and articulate that to somebody else with whatever goal they have, whether it be business, fitness, whatever. But as a coach, that was always my strength and my skill set. And I was self aware enough to know that that is what I probably should be doing. So, because of that, I invested a lot into my personal development when it came to being able to coach. So that
Mm.
gymnastics camp that I was at, I was there for 10 years, every single summer, coming back over and over and over again. And it's a 12-week camp. And I was there all summer, and they would bring in these different coaches every single week. So college coaches, Olympic team coaches, international coaches, the best of the best that my sport had to offer. And I would be taking notes. I'd say, oh, I saw how you did this with this athlete. I saw how you communicated that. I saw the drill that
Mm.
you used with them. I like this. I don't like this. This seems to work. This doesn't seem to work. And so I came into my first day coaching at Michigan with this mindset of, I got this. I've been preparing for this for the last 10 years almost, right? Since I started coaching to pay bills when I was 16 years old. And it didn't work out like that. It didn't work out like that at all. I went in there and I realized that even though I knew that the technical information that I was giving these guys, the prescription was right, the method of delivery was not always right. I was
Mm.
probably 50-50, right? And so what I realized was there's some people who think like me. There's some people who want a step-by-step blueprint, that want an explanation, that want to sit down and talk about it. And there's some people that actually prefer me to get up in their face and say, can you do it a little like less horrible next time? And like just do this one adjustment and just go. And they need one line, and they need some hardcore motivation, and they need to be pushed, and they need one sentence on what to correct. They don't need the blueprint. They don't need the step by. They need one sentence, and then they're going to go. And if you don't do that, then you seem weak in their eyes. They don't want to talk to you that long. It is that you've lost their attention. And I'm like, okay, I got it. So I have to talk to these guys as unique individuals based on how they want to be communicated with, how they want to be coached. Let's go a step deeper. What's going on in your life right now? How's school and academics going for you? What's going on at home? What do you think about your routine construction in gymnastics? There's 10 skills per routine. What do you think about this skill versus this skill? Let's really talk to you as Josh and not just a podcast host. Let's talk to, and we're talking about Edwin earlier. Let's talk to Edwin, not just a guy who's into the personal development world. Let's
Yeah.
talk to individuals. And then because they feel, and what made it click for me was I went back over that story that I told you about Coach Larry. And I said, man, what was it that really made him able to impact me more than any of these other people? Because I've worked with these Olympic team coaches. Like I've worked with the best in the world. They couldn't get me to do half the stuff that Larry could get me to do. And Larry was not successful by a lot of the objective metrics that we would say come with success as a coach. He didn't take anybody to the Olympics. He didn't have that
Mm.
many college recruits. But what he did was connect with me on an individual basis. And I knew that he cared about me as a person more than he cared about me as an athlete. And I said, that's the key. So treating people and connecting before you correct, to me, that's what leadership is all about.
Connecting before you correct is so important. So you probably read this book, right, by Kim Scott, Radical Candor, and it's all about, hey, how do you correct someone, uh, but do it in a way of where, hey, provide praise, criticize privately is essentially the formula of that. But I love the concept that you just said. The prescription was right, but the method delivery was off. I'm totally going to use that. That is beautifully well said. And in the military is the same concept. That's the way I learned leadership. We call it the rule of flexibility. And I lead soldiers from literally refugees from their country. I have soldiers from Haiti, Vietnam. I've had soldiers from the inner city. I have soldiers that grew up in a cornfield in Nebraska. And it's just this beautiful melting pot of 130, men and women with common shared interests, but each one, the delivery has to be slightly different, especially if you want to connect to them. Like if I'm getting a new soldier, whatever generation it is right now, I probably have to be more authentic and more empathetic with them to kind of connect to it and make sure that I'm getting them bought into this shared vision of why are you here and where are we going, versus someone who's probably a Gen Xer who's a senior non-commissioned officer. Well, I don't have to paint that picture to them. I just need to be direct. Hey, I need you to do this. Go execute.
Mhm.
I love that, how it's kind of universal in coaching at a very high level in gymnastics versus leading men and women in the military. It's the same. It's just the rule of flexibility. And as a leader, that's another powerful nugget, Brandon. You have to be able to adapt your skills, both I think orally and in a written form, because it, it
Mhm.
it depends on the method of delivery, and as a leader, you have to be able to adapt. That's beautiful said. I'd
Yeah, it's
love to.
everything is about people, you know, whether it's military, whether it's sports, whether it's business. I think that people see these entities as like this living, breathing thing of their own, right? You
Yeah,
think of a big business, you think of, I don't know, AT&T or Netflix. It's this giant conglomerate, but it's made up of people. Like all a business
exactly.
really is a bunch of people on a common mission trying to move in one direction together.
Yep.
Military, same thing. We've got one objective. We need all these people to work together in unity so that we can move toward this common mission. But if you don't have buy-in with the people, that's all it is. It's not its own monster. It's just a bunch of people. So if you aren't able to connect with people, you're gonna have a problem with leadership.
So where are you currently on your leadership journey? I know you're still doing gymnastic coaching, but you're also doing coaching for mindset, public
Mhm.
speaking. Walk me through all of that.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a wild ride, an absolutely wild ride. So when I was just about to graduate college, I graduated in 2020, right in the
Mm.
middle of the pandemic. So about 2 months before I was going to graduate, I had been kind of connecting with Eric Thomas for a while at that point, and I was volunteering at some of his events and doing as much as I could do for free just to add value to him. And he had this event that was at Michigan State University, so about an hour away from where I lived in Ann Arbor, and it was this free presentation that he gave for the students every single Monday night, and it was open to the public. So for my last 2 years of college, amongst all this other stuff that was going on, I was driving out there. Literally, the routine was wake up around 5:30 or 6. We had morning strength training from 7 to 8, class from 8 to noon or so. Practice at that point, I was coaching from 2 to 5. Then I would jump in the car, drive an hour to Michigan State, listen to ET give a presentation, jump back in the car, drive back to Ann Arbor, and do personal training sessions at night to pay for the gas that I'd spent to get out there. And
Wow.
so I was just trying to just get close, right? I'm a big believer in the power of proximity. So if I want an opportunity, I got to get where the opportunities are. They're not going to come to
Mm.
me. I got to go to them. And so I was getting my face known by ET, again, volunteering at all the events, just free stuff, adding value. And around, this would have been March. Yeah, March of 2020. I knew that I was about to graduate in 2 months. I knew I had gymnastics coaching available as an option for me, but I also felt like I was called to something a little bit bigger. And I still thoroughly believe I'm going to go back to NCAA gymnastics coaching at some point in my life, maybe in like my 40s or 50s, and it's going to be a day of reckoning when that happens because I'm going to just sweep the NCAA. It's going to be a great time. But until then, I'm doing this speaking, coaching, business stuff. And I just felt like I had to step away from the gym for a minute to chase this higher calling. And so I put together 60 pages worth of stuff for ET, literally a folder that I made. I got it from Office, something or another, Staples or something, and put together a folder of 60 pages because I didn't speak back then. I was still super shy, even at 21, 22 years old. I couldn't articulate very well, but I could write. And so I wrote all these motivational captions on topics that I knew he would resonate with: work ethic, persistence, resiliency, all the stuff we're talking about right now, but in written form. And I would write out all my thoughts on them. And I put together a folder, probably 55 pages of that, add in a cover letter, a resume, my disc assessment. I knew he was big on that. So I put that
Mm.
in there, everything I knew would resonate with him. And I went to the Success Series, that's what the event was called, that night. And I promise you, I didn't hear a word that man said. I'm sitting front row, didn't hear anything that he said because I'm nervous out of my mind trying to figure out, how am I going to approach him? What am I going to say? I know I want an opportunity, but what does that even look like? I'm going to graduate in 2 months. It's a mess, right? And at the end of his presentation, it's this arena, probably sits, not, I shouldn't say an arena, but it's like a lecture hall. So it probably
Mm.
sits auditorium. That's the word for it. Probably sits 200, 300 people packed out. And there's a door on the far side opposite of where I'm sitting, and there's a door that's behind me. And that's the door everybody comes in and out of. ET starts to wrap up his presentation and he says, "Sorry, everybody, I'm not going to be able to stick around, take pictures, shake hands, answer questions like I normally do because I keep hearing about this coronavirus thing." Remember,
Mm.
March of 2020, this hasn't all happened yet. We're hearing about it, but it's a China thing. Like we don't even know that it's in the States yet. And he's like, I keep hearing about this thing. I can't take any chances. I'll be back next week. Don't worry. And he walks out the back door. That was the last in-person event he did for 2 years, because the
Wow.
week after that, the world shut down. Literally
Yeah.
the week after that. For whatever reason, something hit my spirit where I was like, I cannot let this opportunity pass. I don't know why, but I'm not going to let it go. I can't chase after him because he's famous and somebody's going to tackle me thinking that I'm trying to like rob him or hurt him or something, right? So I left my laptop. I let my girlfriend was with me. One of my teammates was with me. Left them all in the auditorium. Ran up 2 sets of stairs that were in that door that was behind me. Sprinted out of the building the other way and beat him to his car because I knew where he parked his car every week. Crazy or not, I knew where to be.
Yeah.
And I was literally standing in between his car. And I always joke around with people and say, I'm so glad I did this when I was 20 and not 40, because I probably would have gone to jail. But he stood there and he was like, hello. And I just handed him this folder, 60 pages worth of stuff that I thought might convince him that I'm worth taking a chance on. And keep in mind, it's cold, it's raining and like 40 degrees, windy because it's Michigan in March.
Yep.
You probably know about it. It sucks. And so it's this like movie like scene. And he just says, we'll figure out an internship for you, just on the spot. We didn't talk about pay. It ended up being an unpaid internship. We didn't talk about term. We didn't talk about anything. Right. And I went home and I said, all right, I got my foot in the door. And I did an unpaid internship for him during the summer of COVID, turned down that gymnastics coaching job offer, which was, they offered me $60K a year, which was more than my parents made combined. Turned that down to finish the unpaid internship on a wing and a prayer, hoping it would turn into something. E calls me one day, mid 2020, and says, how much do you want to make in your first year full time? I gave him a number. And then 2 months later, I was on a private jet with him one-on-one after one of his speaking gigs. And that's how fast my life changed. Since then, I started off doing low-level admin work for him, literally spreadsheets, customer service, all that. It was probably only 8 or 9 months of that until I started kind of ascending in the company, became his booking agent, became his manager, started doing business development on some of his coaching companies. And then maybe 6 months after that, I was on stage right next to him in front of 1,200 people, doing something that I never thought I would be good enough or confident enough to do, which was speak on stage. So it's been an incredible journey. And to answer your question of where that's led me now, it's really just building the brand, building my personal brand as a speaker and a coach, and trying to impact as many people as I possibly can. You know, at the end of the day, I think that while the fruits of labor that can come from that industry are really great, like, I'm not somebody who is ashamed of wanting to be successful financially and have nice stuff and enjoy a cool life. But
Yeah.
I also know that at the end of the day, it all goes back to the earth anyway, and I can't take it with me. But I truly believe that if I can go to the gates of St. Peter one day and say, hey, here's all the people whose lives were positively impacted by my work. Here's all the people that were contemplating suicide and they saw one of my videos, they saw me speak and it changed things for them. Here's all the people that were stuck in their career and they saw something in the work that I'm able to do, and it was able to get them from that place of complacency to that place of potential where they're really striving to see what they can do. Here's all the people that were not doing everything they're capable of. And I was able, and here's a lot of people who, maybe were turned off by a lot of these ideas of leadership, and turned off by these ideas of personal development, turned off by these ideas of God and spirituality. And I was able to just move the needle by whatever fraction of a percent, by me being alive. That's leadership to me. I think that leadership is a buzz term now, and people go to these conferences to feel good about themselves, which I shouldn't
Yeah.
say because I'm in that industry, but it's the truth. Like, people show up to these events to stroke their own ego and say, oh, look at what I'm doing, and it feels really good, and you get that dopamine kick from hearing all this amazing information. But at the end of the day, I think that as a leader, you are judged by the people that you develop. You're judged by the people that come after you. Like, I think Larry can be judged by me. Larry shouldn't be judged by Larry. Larry should be judged by me and what I do, because I do what I do because he impacted me. And so if I can do something to make just a little dent in this human experience that we all share, that's the goal of leadership for me.
So many things there, Brandon, with that is just truly, I think, amazing. And the biggest one is as leaders, and totally agree with you. It's a buzzword. If you look online right now, everyone says they're subject matter expert in leadership and leadership and leadership and leadership.
Where's the proof?
We, yeah, deeds, not words. Show me what you've done. I don't want to hear what you've done. Show me what you've done, implement it. But what you just said, being able, and that is the mark of a servant leader, of looking beyond you, and then who are you building and grooming? And I see leadership in distinct phases. The fifth phase of leadership is shaping leaders, shaping other people, and that is the true mark of a successful leader. At the end of the day, when I'm dead and gone, I want to be judged on those that I have groomed to be leaders. My son, my daughter, the men and women that I've led, the people that I'm humbled to work for with in my current job. Where are they at in life, and how have I been able to impact them? That's going to be success to me. And you and I share the same. I got into coaching because I was tired of getting phone calls of soldiers attempting or committing suicide. And I correlated it to, there is a toxic leadership mindset in the military now that is ruining young men and women of getting out of the military. And when they get out of the military, they don't have a sense of fulfillment anymore. They lose their passion, they lose their purpose, and they're in a dark room. There's no light switch. If I can help shape how leaders lead in the military, I can impact more lives, and in turn, I can make a small dent in that epidemic that we have. They call it 22, 22 soldiers committing suicide. And I can't remember if it's every hour. I can't quote I used to know it, but I don't know it off the top of my head. But I love that, man. I really do. Is that I feel like you're a brother from another mother. We're on the same mission set, but we went through different paths in our lives to get to it. And you're truly blessed, and I want to make sure you know that, is that you learned this at a very, very young age. I'm 36 now. In the Army, that's old. Trust me. I'm an old man in the Army now. I feel like an old man anyway. But it took me a lot of hard lessons to kind of get to that. And the other thing that you said, the rule of proximity, but seizing your opportunity, and how you seize your opportunity. You have to be unreasonable and jump on those moments. And it's like you can feel it's almost that God is intervening in a way that you can just feel that this is right and that I need to go do that. And look where you are. Small trajectory, but over a long period of time, if you're just 1 degree off, you're going to end up somewhere totally different in a good way, brother. That's amazing.
100%. I mean, that's what it's all about, is using, I think you said this at the top of the show too, using your experience, that earned wisdom that I call it, right? Because everybody can read books, but earned wisdom, it goes a little further. You talk about it differently when you've been there. But being able to use that and just pay it forward, like, what are you going to do with it? All this experience, all this life experience, the blessings we've been given, the hardships we've been given. What are we going to do with it if we don't use it to help other people?
Yeah. So one of the last questions I want to ask, out of respect to time, I always try to keep it to an hour. Just to let you know, I have so many more questions. I really do.
We got to go round two.
Yeah, we got to go round two. What is one tip that you can give to our listeners right now that they can apply in their leadership?
One tip that people can apply in their leadership, I would say, first and foremost, be slow to judge. I was reading through Luke the other day, a weekly Bible study, and just that concept of you will be judged as you judge others, I think is very, very needed in today's world, especially in the leadership world. I think that the more leaders we can have with a little bit of empathy, a little bit of grace, and by the way, you've got to have high standards as a leader. I'm not saying don't have high standards, and believers trip me out sometimes with that concept because for whatever reason, people have a resistance to that idea that you can be a servant leader, that you can be a empathetic leader, but also hold yourself to incredibly high standards. And that makes absolutely no sense, right? If you think about it from a biblical perspective, the whole Bible is a book of umpteen sins that are punishable by death. It's like you do this one thing wrong, you're out of here, right?
Stoned.
To me, that exactly incredibly high standards. And then you turn the page and it says, but also here's how easy it is to be forgiven and
Mhm.
receive everlasting life. Incredibly high standards, incredibly empathetic, right? When I think of even with gymnastics, right? There's certain skills that they're actually banned now. When I was training, there was still a thing. They're called rollout skills. So on floor exercise, instead of landing on your feet, you actually do an extra half a flip and land on your hands and roll out, right? Like some just
Well,
ninja Jackie Chan stuff.
I love it.
And there's people that have done those skills and gotten paralyzed for life. There's people who have lost their lives on those skills.
Wow.
And it's one of those things where, again, high standards. Failure is really not acceptable there. Like mistakes are really not okay,
Yeah.
because a mistake can be the difference between life and death. The mistake can change your life. So you've got to go into it with the mentality of mistakes are not acceptable. We have to do this to the best of our ability. However, if you do make a mistake and for whatever reason, maybe you over rotated instead of under rotated, hopefully, and you were able to walk away from that okay, then any athlete knows you got to go straight back to the corner, do it again, and not let that shake you. You've got to forgive yourself right there in the moment. You've got to take that pressure and anxiety off yourself right there in the moment. You've got to practice grace right there in the moment. Otherwise, it's going to live in your head and you're never going to be able to do it again. Right. So,
Yeah.
again, that duality of very high standards and also very understanding and empathetic. I think that more leaders need to be able to embody that concept today.
Beautiful. Beautiful example, beautiful tip. And it will work. That's amazing. All right. So final show segment. You're gonna love it. I call it the killer bees. Be
Love it.
brief, be brilliant, be present, and be gone. So the same 4 questions that I ask everyone on the Tales of Leadership podcast. If you're ready, we'll jump into the first one.
Let's go.
So what do you believe separates a good leader from an extraordinary leader?
It's the X factor we talked about earlier. There's technical leadership, which is great, but then there is that connection, borderline spiritual leadership. That separates you from good to phenomenal.
I love it. So what is one resource that you can recommend to our listeners?
Man, I got to plug Eric Thomas's conferences because, I'm his agent.
Mm,
So I kind of feel like I got to do that. But honestly, you got to get around people who are pouring into you. And one thing I always tell people is if you're following World Star and you're not following somebody like Joshua or ET or whoever it is that you look up to, it might not be, my voice might not resonate with you, but somebody else's might. You got to follow these people and put yourself, again, in proximity
yeah.
of the people who are pouring into you. So stop following stupid stuff and use those resources for what they are, which is a tool to be poured into, not to be taken from.
I love that. That's probably one of the best answers that I've had to that question so far. All right. So question 3, if you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice, your younger self, what would it be and why?
I hate to be the corny spiritual guy, but seek God sooner. Yeah,
Mm,
all the personal development books that you're reading were based off of the Bible anyway. So
yeah.
even if you're not religious or spiritual, like it really doesn't matter. Read it as a personal development book and go through it and extract the principles, and your life will change so much faster than you'd even thought possible. So yeah, seek first the kingdom of God.
I love that. So final question, how can our listeners find you and how can they add value to you?
Just following all the social media. I am B Burns on every social media. Big personal brand push right now. We're posting twice a day on every platform: YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. You can find it everywhere. I am B Burns. And just if you see something that resonates with you, share it with somebody else. I promise you, it's not to glorify myself. It's because if there's one person that we can reach through you, not through me, it's worth all the effort, the work, the money, everything else.
Brandon, this has been an amazing episode. So thank you for being
Thank you.
intentional. And I'm glad that we are able to do this. And I'm glad that you're feeling better, man.
100%.
Yeah. Hey, have a great Easter weekend, brother.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. Thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you.